as I said, it's a workshop for creative students and the college process, what you need to know, what families need to know as you go through the process. And I always like to start off, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I started a company called ARTriculate, and I'm an independent college advisor, and I work pretty exclusively with creative students. Not entirely. A lot of kids come to me with an interest in the arts, and then as we start talking about different opportunities and different possibilities for school, sometimes they apply to university like Maryland, sometimes they apply to a small liberal arts school, and sometimes they apply to a college of art and design or a performing arts academy. So it's a little bit of a mix, but they usually come to me initially because that's pretty much where my area of expertise is. But a lot of them also have interest in STEM, or they have interest in creative writing, interest in history or humanities, et cetera. So it's a nice mix, and we have a lot of fun. And I love the kids because I love the creativity of them. They always have something interesting. Their essays are always great and really fun to read and work with them on. So that's a little bit of who I am and the types of students that I work with for the most part. So what I was going to talk about today is different careers in the arts, and then start to talk a little bit about what the college process looks like and some of the words that you might have heard along the way that people just kind of throw out and you don't necessarily know what they mean. And then I might, since it looks like most of the kids here are pretty far along, like juniors, seniors in school, I might not talk so much about the timeline through high school because you've already kind of gone through it. So it might not really make that much of a difference. Talk a little bit about testing, which of course this year is totally crazy, and who knows what it's going to be like in the future. And then different types of possibilities that you'll have when you're applying to college, what some of the timelines are like, what some of the requirements are like, because as I said, the requirements for creative kids going to school, applying to college is much more intense than just sort of a regular kid applying to study history or computer science or something along those lines. So first I want to start talking about careers in the visual arts, because people don't really necessarily think that, a lot of people think, oh, well, my kid is an artist and they're going to be an actor. My kid is an artist. They want to have a picture up in the museum, et cetera, et cetera. But there are a huge number of careers that work off what students learn as they go through visual arts, performing arts, digital media, et cetera. And you can just kind of look here and you'll see I have 3 slides. One is visual arts, one is performing arts, and one is digital media. And there's a little bit of overlap even. So game designers can study in visual arts, or if they're sort of on the computer science end of things, they may do game design and more of the digital media end of things. So I always tell parents, and also kids, that think about when you walk into a Starbucks and all the different things that you see, and you see the furniture laid out in a certain way, and you see the interior of the store designed in a certain way, and even the signs and the logo and everything like that. Those were all done and created by creative teams. So don't despair that there aren't jobs out there. There are actually tons of jobs out there for creative people. And more companies and more projects are looking for creative people to work on them, because creative people are problem solvers, and that's a lot of what companies really value and companies are really looking for. So these are some just careers in visual arts, and these are not exclusive lists at all. And then the next slide are careers in digital arts, and you'll notice that there's some overlap. These are mostly sort of the newer careers in art, because a lot of the digital tools are really starting to be developed. But there's so much out there. There's, you can work on user interface. You can work on visualizing data. You can work on product design. So, like you buy a new phone and there's a whole team of creative people that have worked on the actual physical design of that phone, along with a whole team of engineers who have said, oh, well, the phone can't be more than 1/4 of an inch thick because this is the battery we need to put in it. So these teams work together, and there's a huge role for kids who want to go into these fields and who have an interest in them. And then we kind of move over into performing arts. And again, you'll see some of these fields have overlapped with something you might have seen on another slide. So, you can have a sound engineer who is more into the performing arts, or a sound engineer that's more interested in the digital aspect of it. And then there's a whole array. Think about the last time you watched a movie or a TV show or anything, and it may have only 10 actors, but there's probably 5 minutes of credits. If you go to a movie, if you're watching a TV show or a Netflix show or something like that, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of credits. All of those people on the list have a degree in some aspect of the arts. May not be performing arts, but it could be the costume designer, the cinematographer, person who wrote the script, choreographer, so much that's not just the person that is doing the acting. Do you have a question?
Florence, I wanted to ask you, for the parents that are putting things on the chat, do you want to wait till after the presentation, or how do you?
I'm happy to answer them as I go. It's fine. Yeah. So I see that there's a question about top jobs in terms of demand and pay for visual arts.
Exactly.
I would say that a lot of the top jobs are going to be jobs that overlap with digital media. So user experience type jobs, data visualization type jobs, things that kind of overlap maybe in the computer sphere. But again, it really depends on what the individual skill sets are. If you're a good collaborator, if you're a good leader, if you're a good team leader, a good manager, you have a lot of opportunities. And with big name companies, Google has huge teams of creative staff. Amazon has huge teams of creative staff. Netflix, huge teams of creative people. So it really depends on which area you're looking in. If you're a fine artist and you are committed to being a painter, that's probably not as highly paid. But if you are, interior design, those, people, it depends on who you're working for and where you are. But there are definitely jobs that pay quite well and have a lot of longevity to them. And they're not just sort of come in and work on something for 3 or 4 weeks and then leave. They're, jobs that are just part of the team. What's the how much and what's the range of pay? I mean, you got to look it up for each specific field, and it's pretty easy to find on Google if you just type it in. I can't really tell you, and it depends on, if you're sitting here in DC, that's probably one pay rate. If you're sitting in Los Angeles, that might be another pay rate. Really, really hard to say. But definitely these fields are paying significant money. Certainly more than being I don't know, but they do pay. They really do pay. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about finding your best fit college and what types of things to think about, what types of things to look at as you go through the process. So if you're a junior, you probably want to start getting online and doing a little bit of research. There are lots of different sources for research. I have them on my website. I have a whole list of resources that you can go to that have lists of different schools and different ways to find them, et cetera, et cetera. But some of the things you want to think about is how big is how big is the school? Colleges of Art and Design and conservatories for Bachelors of Fine Arts and Performing Arts tend to be on the smaller side. But you could also go to a school like VCU Arts, and it is wrapped up into a bigger university. So you get everything that Virginia Commonwealth University has to offer, plus an art school. And VCU has a great visual arts program. They have a great performing arts program. So another one is location. Where do you want to be in the country? Do you want to be in a big town, a small town, in the Northeast, in the South, on the beach in California? There are schools everywhere. And the more research you do, you'll start to find them. And some schools there's some great schools that are in some places that you might overlook it at first glance. And some smaller cities have some really great, very strong schools. Something else you want to think about is your social life, because academics are one thing and certainly really important. But if you're not happy there socially and it's not a good cultural fit, you're probably not going to be as successful academically. And so you want to pay attention to that. If you like Greek life and football games, then you need a school that has Greek life and football games. If you really could care less and want to spend your life in the studio, then it really doesn't matter. And you might as well look for schools that don't really have that. What kind of student activism is on campus? What are the politics like on campus? What's the focus of the school? You can read a lot by just looking at their mission statements and by looking at their sort of about us pages. What types of activities are kids involved in? What are the different clubs? What else is there outside of the academics? You want to start looking at that. And also then, what are the facilities like? So do they have big art studios? If you're an artist, do you get your own studio space? When do you get it? If you're a filmmaker, when do you actually get to start making films? If you like to also participate in athletics, what are their athletic facilities like? Some art schools actually have athletic facilities and some don't. So those are all the types of things that you want to check out. Then you want to start thinking about, what are the professors like? What are the outside lecturers like? Who do they bring in to inform students? Who do they have on exhibit? And a lot of this now is really, really well done online, because it's very hard to visit schools these days with COVID. So the schools have really beefed up their online presence. And that has really helped a lot, actually, when researching a school. I mean, on the downside, you can't sort of walk through campus and see what the campus is like. But on the plus side, you can really get a lot more information about what's available from online. And then you want to start looking about, what are the requirements? Do they have a foundation year? A lot of visual arts programs and performing arts programs have foundation years. So you want to see what's involved in that. Is the foundation year something that's strictly you have to apply into a major, or is the foundation year pretty broad and then you select your major after that? Then what is the core curriculum like, and how many classes in the major do you have to take? And how much room elective-wise do you have after you've satisfied your major and your core curriculum? So could you do a minor? There are a lot of visual arts kids who want to do a minor in writing or want to do a minor in computer science. Is there enough room in the program, and are you going to be at a school where you could actually do that? Some kids need some extra learning resources and extra help. So you want to research and see what schools have that available. There are a lot of art schools that definitely have learning resources that are available to kids. Some of the bigger schools have great resources, and some of the bigger schools, though, have sort of administrative layers that make it kind of tough to navigate. You know yourself, you know the kids, so you have to. When you're looking at schools, this is just something that you're going to want to consider. And then, what are the application requirements? So as you start to research schools and you start to find schools that you like, I always tell kids, make a list and keep a list on your computer. And my kids use Google Docs, which makes it really easy, Google Sheets, and you can keep track of everything there. So what are the requirements for application? If you have to do a portfolio, do you need to submit 15 pieces? Do you need to submit 10 pieces? If you're going to do an audition, is it a one minute audition, or is it a 2-minute audition and has to be within a certain genre? So you want to start keeping track of all of that for schools that you're interested in. And then the other thing you're going to start hearing about are the difference in degrees. So an AA degree is an associate's degree, and that is a 2-year degree. And a lot of schools, you can take your 2-year degree and then apply into a 4-year degree program. So Montgomery County Community College has a really great connection to University of Maryland. So if you keep up a certain GPA and you have fulfilled whatever the core curriculum is for the major at Maryland, you pretty much can seamlessly move to Maryland. You definitely want to make sure, if you're going to start at a community college with an AA degree, which for some kids is a fantastic way to start. And it's much, much less expensive. And it's a sort of a much easier kind of runway into college, which for some kids is really what they need. But you want to make sure that when you get your AA degree, what are the options for you moving forward with that degree? Then there's a Bachelor's of Fine Arts, a BFA, which is usually granted by either a College of Art and Design, either a standalone College of Art and Design or one within a bigger university, or a conservatory, an acting conservatory or a film school. So when you're talking about a BFA program, most of the time you'll be taking sort of 75% of your classes, and it's very intense in that major. And it doesn't give you a lot of room to take electives. So for some students, that's perfect. That's exactly what they want to do. For other students, they want a little bit more leeway. So that's definitely something you want to check in the schools you're applying to make sure and see what type of degree they offer. And then there's a BA/BS, so Bachelor's of Arts, Bachelor's in Science. Usually a Bachelor of Science has a few more required classes than a Bachelor's of Arts, but that's kind of a loose definition. Also, sometimes if you're doing a Bachelor's in Science in gaming, for instance, you will probably take some computer science classes as well. If you're doing a Bachelor's of Arts in gaming, you will do more in the humanities and more in sort of the art side of things. But that's not a hard and fast rule. You have to look at each school and see what they're offering and what the requirements are. And then there are some schools which offer a combined BFA plus a BA and a BS. And they're usually 5-year programs. They're super, super intense, and they're super, super difficult to get into. So if that's something that you think you might be interested in, you definitely want to do your research in advance and really make sure that you're prepared to apply into those programs and then to actually sort of participate in them fully, because they're pretty intense. So for some parents who have gone through college in the US, who sort of look back and think, oh, I applied to 5 colleges and it wasn't any big deal and I got into 3 and that was fantastic. Things have really changed. Kids apply now to sort of 8 to 12 schools, and usually I encourage students to sort of have 3 or 4 schools that are what I call a reach school. So the stats for the school are a little bit more advanced than what you're bringing to the table, but maybe there's something else that grabs them. So you're a fantastic visual artist, or you have great performing art skills or something along those lines. So they will accept you anyway. And then there's target schools where you're right in their sweet spot for grades, you're right in their sweet spots for testing. And so you're a pretty good applicant for them. And then there are likely schools where you probably have stats that are a little bit better than the school. Those are great schools to apply to if you're looking for merit aid, because they love kids who are overperforming what the rest of their school is doing. It brings them up in the world of, the college statistics and all the lists. So you're more apt to get a little bit more financial aid from them. Schools definitely have different careers, different majors. So there's a lot of interdisciplinary majors now. It's not just English, math, biology, physics, painting, ceramics, etc. It's things like, gender studies and digital media and all sorts of things that are really interesting. And some schools even allow you to put together your own majors. So there's just a lot more flexibility and a lot more creativity in the majors of the schools. There are also schools that have co-op and internship programs built into their curriculum. Those are great schools to look at if you think that you want to really take the time to sort of have a directed career path. Some kids really, really love it. For some schools, it might mean that you spend an extra year in school or an extra semester in school, because part of the curriculum is doing these co-op programs, but then you're not in class. So, like everything in life, it's a balance. If you participate in summer programs, either in the visual arts or the performing arts, that can work to your advantage because you'll learn more about the schools. The schools will learn more about you, but there are no schools that are direct pathways. So you do a summer program in a certain school, and then you automatically are accepted into the college. So but it's a great way to build up your resume. And I don't necessarily mean that of extracurriculars. Everyone always talks about extracurriculars, but it's a great way to work on your portfolio. It's a great way, if you're a performing artist, to work on your monologues, which you're going to have to present for your auditions. If you're a film student, it's a great way to start creating some films that you might want to present as part of your application. So it really teaches you some skills. It also allows you to interact with kids who are interested in what you're interested in. And it allows you to see what it's like to be immersed in what you think you may want to be, because it may be fantastic, or you may kind of come back after 4 weeks and say, oh, wow, being around arts kids 24/7, there's just no way I want to do that. So it's really a great learning experience. So if you can handle it and you can find a good program, I really do advise families to consider it. We talked a little bit about how there are a lot of traditional liberal arts colleges that offer competitive BFA programs. So don't discount some of the big flagship universities and think that they don't have good BFA programs, good programs in the arts. Many of them really have great programs in the arts. And even if you're not applying to a BFA program, you could consider submitting supplemental material in the arts to sort of bolster your application. So even if you're not going to go and apply into a BFA program, you may want to put together some visual arts materials or anything else along those lines to kind of increase your opportunities and your chances for acceptance. So these are 2 slides, and I can send people the slide deck. So don't kind of sit here and write everything down. It's basically orange is visual arts, purple is performing arts, and green is film and digital arts, digital media. So it's kind of, for each year and each summer, what types of things should you think about doing? And you definitely want to, as you go through high school, start participating more and more in your art. And like if you're a visual artist, start participating in the plays. So start becoming and doing some set design or doing some costume designing, because the more broad your experience is, the more valuable a candidate you're going to be when you start applying to college. And then, start perfecting what you do. Start building a portfolio of your work. So portfolio of your visual design work, portfolio of your performing arts work, and keep a list, because when you have to go back, it's in senior year, and write everything down of what all your extracurriculars were, it's really easy to forget stuff. So I always tell people, just keep a list somewhere, and it doesn't even matter what form. It could be a piece of paper, it can be in a notebook, it can be in your sketchbook, it can be online in a doc, but keep a list and see, just so you can look back and know what it is that you've done. So if you've taken an after-school program one year, you know what it is without having to kind of scratch your head and try to replay everything in your mind. So I definitely advise people to keep a list as they go. Some things to consider when you're applying to schools, especially for visual arts kids, is that especially in this area, people really hang on school names, but the best programs may not be at the best named school. So there are some amazingly great performing arts programs and visual arts programs that are at schools that you might not have ever heard of. But I can tell you that the acceptance rates, especially for some of the performing arts programs, especially for like acting, 1% to 2%. Film schools, tough to get into. So it's kind of the same, you can't, it's hard when you sit around and you talk to your friends and they all list off these amazing schools that they're applying to, and you sort of talk about a school over here that nobody's heard of, but that happens to have one of the best programs in the country. So try not to fall into that trap of only the best names have the best programs, because it's not necessarily a correlation 1-to-1. Film and acting students may have to write 10 to 15 supplemental essays. So for your common application essay, you're going to have, for your common application, you're going to have to write one essay, your personal statement, which is around 600 words. But as you start applying to schools, they're all going to have supplemental essays. And some of them are kind of, you know, why do you want to go to NYU? Or Maryland has a list of, I think it's 10 different prompts, and you have to give them sort of one sentence answers to them. But then some of the film programs and the acting programs, the schools that you'll apply to have just unlimited amounts of essays. It's like 4, 5, 6 essays. It's a lot of work, and you have to really dedicate the time and be dedicated to doing it. Visual art students, you definitely want to start putting together your portfolio starting junior year. You really don't want to submit anything 9th or 10th grade. You can if it's really spectacular or if it won an award. You know, if you submitted to Scholastic and you've won an award, you definitely want to put that in. Just by the way, Scholastic has already opened the Scholastic Art and Writing Contest. If you go to Scholastic, I think it's scholastic.org. I don't know when the Montgomery County due date is, because it's pretty much done by region, but it is probably sometime in December, sort of latish December. You definitely want to start submitting to some of these contests, because it's a great way to kind of get an accolade, and it's a great way to have somebody else review your material. So you definitely want to start looking for contests and ways that you can start exhibiting your work and participating in different things. Also, the quality of the presentation of the work really matters. So if you're going to take pictures of your work, take good pictures of them. And you can use your phone and lights. I can send you a document on how to take pictures of your work. When you do your auditions, you want to use good equipment. When you film your film, if you're applying to film school, you want to create a good product that you're proud of. So think about that, because that's all part of the package that you're presenting to schools. Showing teamwork is really important. So that's a hard thing for kids, especially in the visual arts and performing arts. It's a little bit easier. In film, it's a little bit easier because you can kind of be the director or have a lead or something like that. In visual arts, it's kind of tough. But if you can find some projects where you can be the lead on, if you can work for your school newspaper and take the lead on certain aspects of it, that's really a great thing to be able to show. But schools also don't want to see prima donnas. Being the prima donna, nobody wants to have the prima donna as part of their student body. If you're a visual arts student, you want to go to National Portfolio Day, which is in the fall. I think there are 4 or 5 more dates left. They're on the weekends, and you can go to nationalportfolioday.org and see the list of them. And I've worked with a number of kids. This year's it's a little bit different because it's all virtual online. So you kind of sign up for a date, sign up with a school, and then you get 15 minutes to show your work. But it's definitely worth going to National Portfolio Day. Gives you a great opportunity to have somebody outside of your normal teacher give you some feedback on your work. Auditions are usually done through Unifieds. This year, each school is doing them on their own virtually, so that's a little bit of a different process. Students are going to also need to learn how to talk about their art. They're probably going to have to write an artist statement, regardless of which form of art they're going into. Talk about why they do what they do, who's influenced them, what they might do differently, all sorts of things along those lines. So you need to learn how to talk about your art. The best way to do that is to read how other people talk about their art, so that you'll start learning what the vocabulary is that you want to be able to use. In non-COVID time, kids who are performing artists spend a huge amount of time, getting ready for plays. So it's almost like a part-time job if you've got a kid who's doing performing arts. So keep that in mind when you're sort of thinking about scheduling and applying to schools and things. So just so you have a little bit of an idea, and again, like don't write this down and they change every year, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of what applying for BFA in visual arts is all about. It's a lot of work. There are some terms here. So early decision is usually in November. You apply to one school and it's binding. That is great if you're absolutely sure that it's the school you want to go to. It may not be so great if you're not sure. And there are sometimes some financial aid implications in it as well, because you can't turn down the school. So you have to basically accept their aid package. So if financial aid is important to you, sometimes applying early decision is not the best thing in the world. There's also early action, which is another earlier submission date. It's also usually in November, but it's not binding. So basically it's just nice because you would know if you got into a school probably by winter break, which is a great way to start your winter break. I like to have kids apply early action because at least you've applied into a school and hopefully found out one way or the other early enough. So maybe you can take some of your likely schools off the list. You don't have to submit so many applications in January. It's always great to get accepted. Schools like to accept kids early too. There are a lot of schools who accept more kids early than they do late because it fills up their enrollment numbers more certainly. Schools are a business just like anything else. So they want to know that you're coming and they want you to come as much as you want to go to them. That's always something to kind of remember throughout the process. Regular decision is the other type of decision, and that's usually in January, February. And then there's rolling decisions. So basically you submit your application and you find out 6 weeks or so afterwards if you've been accepted. There are a bunch of art schools that work on a rolling decision process. So that's also kind of nice. So if you find a school later in the game that you're interested in and they're rolling admissions, you sometimes have another choice. But these are just for visual arts students, some examples of what's required. Some visual arts programs also want you to do a specific piece for their application. So RISD does, Parsons does, there are some others that do as well. And that also just adds time and another layer of kind of complication to the whole application process. And then if you're a performing arts student, some schools require you to submit a pre-screen. So then they look at the pre-screen and decide if they want to invite you for an audition. So there are, different hurdles to cross in the application process. The pre-screens vary. They can be really short. They can tell you they want you to do a certain period. Performing arts kids, for the most part, have to apply earlier in the game because the process is so much longer, especially if they have to go through auditions. So these are just some of the 3 schools. I just picked them up. And as I said, they could change. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. If you're applying to the University of California system schools, there are, I believe it's 8 or 10 schools in the UC system that use a specific application format. And so you basically apply to all the UC schools, you check off which campuses you want to apply into, and then they do an evaluation all in one. So better and worse. Is early application deadline November 1st? It really depends on the school, and you really have to look at the schools. And this year, a lot of them changed. I would say November 1st is a good, for a lot of schools, yes. Some schools are November 15th. Some schools I've even seen December 1. I definitely advise you also to don't wait until the last minute when you're applying, because everybody else is waiting to the last minute when they're applying, and you can get kind of hung up on the common application, which is what you use to submit your applications. And also, if you're missing something or you have a question, you have no time to send a note or to call the admissions office and to get some clarification or get answers. So I try to encourage kids to apply at least sort of 5 days to a week early, just in case there's an issue that you haven't thought of. Gives you a little bit of wiggle room in the process. So here's the timeline. I kind of talked about this just before, but here's the basic timeline. So there's early action, early decision, which are mostly in December. The other thing to check is there are schools that have scholarship deadlines that are not necessarily linked to early action or early decision. So Virginia Commonwealth, for instance, if you apply by November 1st, you're automatically eligible for some scholarships. If you apply afterwards, you're not. And you wouldn't necessarily know this by just looking. So sometimes you have to do a little bit of digging, especially for the scholarship information. Some schools also have separate essays that you have to write for scholarships. So it's definitely worth it. And I will say there are schools which really, really provide a fair bit of scholarship money. I've worked with kids who have gotten $20,000 a year, $25,000 a year in scholarship. And that makes a huge difference, and certainly makes a difference between applying into your local, University of Maryland system, which is a great school, or applying to a private college. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm not going to apply to a private college because there's no money. But there is actually, some schools actually do have a fair bit of money. Someone just asked a question, what's rolling admission? Rolling admission is basically the school runs admissions until the class fills up. So you could submit your application November 10th and hear back from them December 10th. Or you could submit your application April 1st and hear back from them May 1st. But if they don't have any space, they're going to close admissions. They're going to close up. So just because there's no deadline, you can't assume that, oh, I could apply in April and still be considered. They may have closed up their admissions. Performing arts students and film students usually have an earlier date, but definitely performing arts students usually have an earlier date. Visual arts students, for the most part, you're going to have to submit a portfolio. And that goes for digital media too. And so you have to submit a portfolio. You do it using a product which all the schools use called SlideRoom. And you basically submit your work and title it, tell what media it is, what the dimensions are, and then you get about 100 characters to describe it and talk a little bit about it. So if you're at the point now where you're submitting your portfolios to schools, really think about what you want to say in the description, because describing a piece has a huge impact rather than letting someone just kind of look at it and make their own decision about what it was that you were trying to do. I always advise kids to, whatever optional essays or opportunities to tell a little bit more about you and tell a little bit more about what you're providing and what you're offering and what you bring to the school, the better. So always take advantage of that optional essay or that optional opportunity. Scholarship money, with some schools, if you apply earlier, you have more opportunity for scholarships. So you don't want to wait, because there are definitely schools that have allocated a certain number of dollars for scholarships, and once they run out, that's what they have to give. So waiting until the last minute may hurt you on the scholarship front as well. So basically, this is a little bit of what I do. I help students and families work through what schools are the best schools for them and what meets all their needs, their academic needs, their social needs, their financial needs. Come up with a list and then talk about what's available, help kids put together really good applications that are specific to those schools, help them put together portfolios and audition materials that make them more competitive than they might be otherwise. I bring a level of knowledge and experience, so I can say, well, if this school is looking for this type of student, or this school is looking for this type of work. And just spend a lot of time brainstorming the process, not the process, but brainstorming the essays and making sure that they are really well written and really talk and tell a lot about the student and the work. And then the other thing that I really help kids with is keep track of all the deadlines, because the deadlines and the requirements, there are a lot of deadlines and requirements involved in the process. So I I don't know if anybody has any questions. If you haven't asked me any questions on the chat, feel free to be in touch with me. I'm happy to answer any questions. I send out an email on Fridays, and I'll put you guys on the email list. You can unsubscribe if you want, but I talk about different aspects of applying to college, different contests when I know about them, different exhibits and things like that I think you and your students would probably benefit from and enjoy and sort of appreciate.